support universal access membership?
Yes, universal access membership is one of the policies I'm running on in this election.
Why?
I think it's a really great way to engage everybody with the experiences that the university union has to offer, and being able to provide those sorts of benefits, access to club societies, is definitely beneficial for everybody. So.
Okay. Well, the second question is: do you support affirmative action, and why or why not?
Well, I'd say that affirmative action is obviously one of the systems in place for the election. I think it's great to have female representatives on the union. It's important to make sure that the views of all candidates, all people, are properly represented within the union structure. And so in that sense, I am in favour of it.
Do you think all people currently are represented in terms of the union structure, or what areas for improvement do you see there?
Well, look, I mean, I think it just depends on who wants to throw their hat into the ring and give it a go in terms of different people. But I do think that it's certainly the job of a union board director to represent and act in the best interests of all the students, regardless of their particular characteristics.
So the fact that there hasn't been an international student on board in the last 3 or 4 years, would that seem to you an area that needs redress?
Well, look, it's a democratic election, so I suppose at the end of the day it comes down to the candidates willing to step forward and how they campaign and how the voting populace responds to them. So I think, obviously, it'd be great to see an international student give it a go, but we can always look to how we can improve the board in the future, sure.
Cool. So what's your attitude to fair trade, and have you signed the fairly educated contract in inverted commas? Well,
I haven't signed this fair trade contract in inverted commas as of yet, and I don't really intend to, because I think that the job of the board directors, especially in terms of something like the whole fair trade coffee issue, is to act in the best interests of the students and ensure that the coffee is both affordable but also socially responsible, as the union is moving towards that direction right now. I think that's a really positive step that they're taking. And in terms of looking for that socially ethical producers, that's great. And whether or not that has to be explicitly fair trade or that one type, I don't think it needs to be so niche or so focused, but I think it's great if we are looking at how we can be responsible consumers.
So you would put economic concerns of the union above the ethical concerns of whether it was fair trade?
Sure, not necessarily. I think that it's important that we can, as the union is moving towards sourcing socially responsible coffee, and I think fair trade is one sort of form which that may be provided, but it's not the only form that needs to be provided. And if we can balance economic benefits and socially just outcomes at the same time, and I would hope that we could work towards that, and that's a great outcome for everybody involved.
Okay, so moving beyond that, are you a member of any political party? And regardless of that, what do you see as the current role of political parties, both in the elections and on the board of the union? And do you think, and what do you think of its current status?
Okay, sure. So I might break that one up a bit if that's okay. So firstly, I am a member of a political party. Liberal Party of Australia is what I'm associated with. In terms of their role on the board, was that the next step? Yes, I think all candidates, all people, come to something like the election with their own views, ideologies and beliefs, but I don't think that should be determinant on how they act as board directors. If I was elected to the board, I'd want to be talking to my colleagues, I want to be talking to the people on the ground, the students, I'd want to be looking at all the information available. Party politics and ideology, to me, has no place in that sort of capacity in acting as in the best interest of the students who the union represents.
So do you think that political factions obviously often give support to specific candidates and pull their resources and predefine members behind candidates?
Sure.
Do you think that's a bad thing?
Well, look, I certainly haven't enjoyed any of that organised party support at this point, but what I do think is that if there are different groups of students around the university who are looking to make up their own mind about which candidate support, that's their democratic right to do so.
Okay, so to that point, is it true that you lost your initial Liberal backing to Nick Kaufman because you were deemed not conservative enough?
I had a good laugh at that wet lib title, actually, but look, I never particularly had this Liberal backing to begin with, and nor did I actively court it. As I said before, I think that it's in the interests of the students themselves to decide who to support, regardless of politics, what they think is in the best interest of the union in terms of their representatives. And to that end, I think Nick Kaufman's a great candidate. If certain people want to back him because of his beliefs, then good luck to him. But in terms of myself, I don't feel that I've lost any sort of backing in this regard.
So you're not relying in any way on the people power or resources or even just influence of the Liberal Club on campus?
No, well, it's fairly explicit that they're backing Nick Kaufman instead of myself, and good luck to Nick and to them. I just want to run a strong campaign that's trying to meet the needs of students on board, and hopefully people will respond to that positively.
Cool.
Okay, so moving beyond that, why do you think there are so few candidates this year, and do you think that is going to have an effect on the quality and outcome of the election?
Interesting question. I mean, I think in terms of why there's so few candidates, I could only really speculate in terms of people's own goings-on, what they're engaged with, why people decide to commit. There's no doubt that running for election alone, let alone being a board director, is a huge responsibility and a huge work commitment. And obviously it's something I and the other candidates are willing to take on board. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to begin with. But I think that certainly must be a consideration that's weighed heavily in people's minds and perhaps a reason why not so many people have given it a crack. But in terms of how that affects the quality of the candidates, I wouldn't necessarily go so far as to say because there are less candidates that somehow the quality has suffered. I've been very impressed by my colleagues who are running, and I think it's really great to see people, regardless of the number running, who are that enthusiastic to really want to get involved and try and make the union an even better experience for the people involved.
But do you think voters will have less choice as a result of the reduced number?
Well, I mean, I suppose in terms of numeric terms, yes. I mean, if there are less candidates, you have less choice.
Will it be a less diverse choice, though?
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say it'd be a less diverse choice either. I mean, there are people of all different backgrounds, people with different sorts of experiences within the university framework, different year levels, different genders. It's all that sort of thing. So I do think there's still a variety on offer, and really it's up to the voters to choose who best represents their interests come election day.
Okay, so moving on from that, how do you view the commercial negotiations that have taken place between the university and the union over the past 2 years?
Sure. Well, I don't think it would be an exaggeration to say it's been a fairly acrimonious set of negotiations between the university and the union. I think it's a credit to previous boards that the union has been in such a fiscally sound place that there was the potential to go it alone, as it were, without university support. And that said, I think it's been great that the SSAAF funding has come through and enabled at least to be a bit of a mending of bridges, as it were, between the university and the union. And I'd certainly look, if I was in the position of a board director, to continue to build on, rebuild those relations after these 2 years, as you mentioned, that have been acrimonious, to look for the future. Because I think that both the university and the union are at their best when they're able to work together and cooperate on meeting the needs of students.
Okay, so further to that point, what do you think about the current breakdown of the SSAAF funding between the organisations? And do you think that's particularly fair? I know that you have stated in your policy statement that that we were lucky that the union secured university funding in 2012. Do you think this amount of funding is cause for celebration?
Look, I think it is really great that the union did get a nice large chunk, over $3 million of the SSAAF funding, because it's the money coming out of our fees, right, to meet our needs as students and fund the student experience. So obviously, as a board director, if I got that opportunity, I'd be looking to increase it. I mean, of course, if the union has more funds from the university, from things like SSAAF funding, then we have the potential to do more. It's fiscal reality, of course. So I think that it is great that we did receive that level of funding from the university, especially looking at how acrimonious the negotiations had been. And I think if we're able to consolidate those funds, to even build on them in the future, then that's just going to be a more solid ground for the union to be relying on and keep investing in what students need.
So in terms of the union's decision to not try and renegotiate the funding that became available with the Sydney Life Fund, where they could have stood to gain an extra... How much exactly?
1.1 million?
Yeah. If you had been a board director, would you have insisted on a renegotiation to try and get more money out of that?
Look, I wouldn't want to look sort of retroactively at what I could have done if I was there. I'm sure there are information available to the board directors at the time and situations that I can't particularly respond to because I'm not aware of. But I could certainly say that if I was in the position of a board director looking in the future, of course I'd be looking at how we can get the best deal for the union in terms of funding from sources such as that, just so either we can grow the pie, as it were, and make sure we can invest more money into the student experience.
But obviously, even though you keep speaking about the student experience, as does the union often, they don't have, like, it is not fair to say that the union has a monopoly on the student experience. And to that point, the other organisations involved in SSAAF funding also contribute to the student experience in a number of ways. So do you think it is perhaps a little bit overstated to say that we will pursue the union's best interest, which is getting more money, which is better, therefore, for all students in every single case, particularly because not every student, as it stands, is also a member of the union, unlike, for example, the SRC?
Sure. No, I certainly understand what you're saying, and I wouldn't want negotiations in that sense to be sort of a zero-sum cutthroat game between the different organisations trying to just divide up the pie between the different groups. I'd like to think that the union board would be able to sit down and work it out, as it has done with the other different organisations, how those funds can be allocated, the most appropriate way to allocate those funds, and that sort of positive dialogue between the groups is obviously the most productive way and calmest way to really work through those sorts of issues.
Okay. So the question number 8 is, do you think you're a good negotiator, and if so, why? One assumes that you do, but why?
Well, look, I'd like to term myself a good negotiator, but I suppose that just comes down to the idea that I like to listen. I like to hear what people have to say, what their grievances are, what they like, what they don't like, and try and work out a solution between that and with other people. I mean, it's that's the best way when it comes to negotiating, in my opinion, to resolve something, to hear what the different sides are, to try and form some sort of consensus and forward from there.
Okay, so moving forward, what ideas do you have to make the union's commercial operations more sustainable and profitable? I know that when looking to your policy document, where you found it to be comparable to some of the other policy documents, relatively quite vague. I know that you've hinted that you will be releasing more policy documents in the future.
Bit of a teaser.
Just specifically, firstly on that issue, what are your ideas for those commercial operations?
Sure. Well, look, I think in terms of commercial operations, being on the board, there'd be a wealth of more information that I'd be able to access and be able to provide more detailed answers with. But from the position I'm in now, what I could say is we're in an interesting situation, from at least what I understand, with the commercial operations, that we're somewhat reaching a cap of saturation in terms of what is available in terms of union outlets and the population that's going to at the university who's going to pursue those sorts of avenues. With that said, we should always be looking for how we can, what our union outlets are saying they need in terms of, improved services or what students want to see from those. I think it's all about listening to what people want. And at the end of the day, whether that's better quality food, more range of beers on the tap, whether that's cheaper discounts or more discounts on stuff like coffee. I think the best way for any board director, but certainly what I'd be looking to do, is to really engage with the students and see what they want from their access and commercial outlets. Yeah.
And even if it's speculative, because as you said, you don't have access to all the information, how would you go about engaging the student population further?
Yeah, good question. Well, it's certainly something I've been looking for doing as part of my policy with the redesign of the website and the My USU idea. I'd really like to have a sort of instant update forum where students could just fire off a quick feedback form to let us know what they're thinking about things like the commercial outlets, what they want to see more from the union. But other than that as well, I think it is simply a matter of getting out there and talking to people. I mean, there's nothing better than having a beer at Manning and asking people what they think about it, or having sort of things like board meetings, encouraging people to come along and have their say. I think it's really important for all board directors, but especially, myself, and that if I got to that position, to really put yourself out there and try to go that extra step to engage with people and see what they want.
Okay, so that was in regards to the first part of my question about your policy document concerning the commercial operations. In regards to the second, so yes, you mentioned that this is a bit of a teaser. Is that, so you do have a policy document that you are just waiting to release? Yes,
I'm just working through it. I want to make sure that any information I release is thoroughly researched, well thought through, and well articulated, so that people can see what I want to deliver for them.
That's understandable, but to not have a fuller policy document that is well researched, understood, and known about now, don't you think it would have been better to have that available to students earlier, given that it is the main basis on which they could inform their vote?
Well, look, I think that's certainly one way to approach it. I wouldn't want there to be a sort of cookie-cutter approach to each candidate saying by X date you should have a full policy document out or this sort of information available. Now, I think especially with still a good 2.5 weeks to go before voting day, there'd be plenty of time for students to be able to review the policy documents I released, to come and have a chat to me or any of the people working on my campaign and really hear what I have to say. I welcome it. I'd love people to come and ask me what I can do for them.
So we can expect a policy document coming out soon?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And I'm, of course, happy to answer any questions on those when they're released.
Yeah, sure.
So what do you see as the purpose of the USU?
Sure.
You've waxed lyrical about
Indeed.
about it catering to the student experience.
But what does that mean in practical
some
terms?
Specifics.
Yes, of course. Look, I think, and a lot of this just comes from what I've been able to enjoy. I've been here, this is my 3rd year at the university. I think the union does some really great things in student experience. So things like, I enjoy going to Manning and having a beer with my friends. A lot of my best mates I've met through the clubs and societies I've been able to get stuck into, or even just enjoying things like, the acoustic sessions that happen. I think it's really great that the union facilitates that sort of culture, those sorts of different things you can enjoy while being at university. And that's firmly what I believe to be the role of the union, and indeed one of the greatest successes is being able to create a really strong identity and campus culture for people to engage with in whatever aspect they be, whether they want a coffee discount or whether they want to get involved in a club and society. It's there to cater to the needs of students.
So, to that end, do you think you are qualified for the position of a member of the USU board, and why?
Sure. Well, I've thrown my hat in the ring, so I could safely say I feel I'm qualified to be a director of the union. I think I would qualify for that position because I love it, for starters. I'm passionate about it. I want to make sure that in that capacity I'd be able to fully engage and continue to deliver for students. I like, as I was saying, to hear what people want. I want to be able to get out there, hear what people aren't happy with or indeed what they are happy with, and just keep building on it, keep building on the union experience and make sure that it's delivering for what everybody wants.
All of which are admirable sentiments, but judging by the CV document that you sent through to us, you haven't held any executive positions in the Clubs and Societies program, which is a fairly prominent part of the union. Would it be unfair to say that your involvement with the union outside of obviously having a drink at Manning has been rather circumstantial, negligible?
Well, I mean, I suppose it depends on how you look at it. See, I wouldn't say that personally, but that's in the sense of I've been able to be involved in clubs and societies on just sort of as a general basis. So if you turn up to something like a mini-mun with the United Nations Society or go to a PolSoc, How to Write an HD essay event, that's been my level of involvement. And I think that's been really beneficial because I can sort of experience, as most students do, that sort of just ground level involvement in the club without necessarily being on the club and societies. I don't necessarily think a shopping list of titles or exec positions is what should define a board director. It takes all shapes and sizes to really make it a productive union because it represents so many different types of students.
Obviously, but working within a particular organisation, you need to have an understanding of not only what that organisation does, but the processes and systems that it has in place in order to be able to provide those programs. One of the best ways to do that is not by understanding what things the USU does, but actually understanding how they do that. And one of the main ways to do that is to be involved in some capacity in the union board, which it does not look from what you have sent through to us that you necessarily have.
Sure. Well, look, I think I don't disagree with you. I think it's great to be able to know how the union or any organisation is able to facilitate those sorts of things. But at the same time, I wouldn't necessarily say that detracts from my candidacy because I think that being able to get involved if I was elected and really try and make an effort, which I would, to ensure that I did understand how things went about and indeed how they could be improved, is something I certainly look to do. I'd want to make sure that clubs and societies continues to be a really strong aspect of the union program. And I just think that it's a matter of ensuring that you engage with it, but it doesn't necessarily have to be through the position of having been on an exec.
Yeah. All right. And so, which of the current board members do you admire the most, and why?
Oh, that's a tough question. I mean, I'm personal friends with a number of the board directors right now, and I think they all do a fantastic job of it. I mean, I think it's hard. It's really quite hard to pick one in particular. I got to tell you.
Who are your personal friends on the board?
Oh, look, I mean, I know Zach Thompson. I know Asta. I know Jackie. I know Reese. I mean, there's a number of them there who've all been nice to me and seem to have been very active board directors.
What involvement does Jackie have in your campaign?
Well, Jackie's been a great help in terms of advising me on questions when I have them, as have a number of other board directors. If I sat down with a number of them when I was contemplating getting involved and just said, hey, what are your thoughts? How did you go about it? You know, that sort of thing. And it's been really good to have other people like Jackie to ask, because I don't pretend to be an expert on everything. I'm really keen to get involved, and I just want to expand my knowledge so I could be a really productive board director if I got the chance.
I understand that, but to our knowledge, other candidates have singled out which board members that are running them or that they are associated with. Are you denying the fact that Jackie Munro is more than any other member of the board associated with your campaign and contributing to its continued running? Oh, look,
I'm very happy to say that Jackie's associated with my campaign, but I wouldn't want that to be construed in terms of me being beholden to her or anything like that. I welcome her support, and I'm very grateful to have her on board, but at the same time, I'm certainly running a campaign on my own terms.
Okay, so which of the other candidates do you think would make the best board director, and why?
Sure. I think that I'm very impressed, I got to tell you, with the other candidates. It's exciting to be in a race with them. If I had to single one out, I'd say I've been very impressed with Hannah Morris. I mean, being an international global stage student myself, she started INSOC, and I think she's really a passionate person and would really invest herself in the board experience. So I'd be happy to single her out as a particular one. But like I said, all of them are quality candidates.
Cool.
So, moving beyond that, as a final question, can you tell us, if you were elected, who you would vote for in the race for president of the union? Sure.
Look, I don't particularly have an answer to that question, I'm sorry. I'm very much focused on ensuring I can run the best campaign I can, and hopefully getting to the position to be on board. And in terms of the politicking that comes after that, well, that's certainly something that would come around now, I'd say. Right.